The quiet suburban street was bathed in an eerie glow, red and blue lights reflecting off damp pavement. Police tape stretched across the perimeter, fluttering in the cool evening breeze like a tattered banner announcing tragedy. Clusters of neighbors stood in their doorways and on lawns, whispering in hushed tones. Some craned their necks for a better view, their faces pale with morbid curiosity. Behind the fluttering curtains of the homes, anxious eyes peered out, catching glimpses of uniforms moving with grim efficiency. The occasional crackle of police radios punctuated the air, blending with the distant hum of crickets, a serial soundtrack to the unfolding horror. "Did you hear what happened?" a man murmured to his neighbor, voice tinged with disbelief. "They said it was Mia Delgado. You know, the girl on TikTok. The one with all the followers." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the crowd. Mia Delgado lay sprawled on the manicured grass of her backyard, her vibrant life extinguished in a heartbeat. Her once glossy brown hair was matted with blood, pooling beneath her head and staining the garden stones. The sharp edges of the rock gleamed dully under the police floodlights. Nearby, her phone rested on the ground, its cracked screen glowing faintly. A TikTok video looped endlessly, a joyous, carefree moment frozen in time. Her laughter echoed from the tiny speakers, an unsettling contrast to the cold stillness surrounding her now. "She didn't deserve this," whispered one of the officers as he knelt beside her, his gloved hands hovering hesitantly over the phone before shutting it off. The laughter stopped, plunging the scene into an oppressive silence. Ethan Walker sat hunched on the back steps of the house, his head in his hands. The sleeves of his sweatshirt were pushed up, revealing bruised knuckles that betrayed a violent struggle. His shoulders shook. Whether from sobs or the cold, it was hard to tell. Two detectives stood before him, their faces carefully neutral. "Ethan," one of them said, his tone firm but not unkind. "We need you to tell us exactly what happened." "I didn't mean for it to happen," Ethan muttered, his voice cracking. He looked up, his pale face streaked with tears. "It was an accident, I swear. I didn't mean—" The other detective crouched to his level, meeting Ethan's panicked gaze. "You're going to have to do better than that. Start from the beginning." Inside the house, Mia's mother, Lisa, stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. Her hands clutched the frame for support as she stared blankly at the scene unfolding outside. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her chest heaving with silent sobs. Behind her, Mark, Ethan's father, gripped her shoulder, his own face etched with anguish. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. What could he say to comfort her when the tragedy was so personal, so catastrophic? Lisa finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. How? How could this happen?" Mark tightened his grip, his own voice a whisper. "We'll figure it out. We have to." But the words felt hollow, even to him. Their blended family, once full of hope and second chances, now lay shattered, just like Mia's phone on the ground outside. The narrative flashed back to a pivotal moment. Weeks earlier, the Delgado Walker household had been alive with celebration. 1 million followers, Mia exclaimed, holding up her phone for everyone to see. Her face was alight with joy as she twirled in the living room. "Can you believe it?" Lisa beamed with pride, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. "You deserve this, sweetheart. All your hard work is paying off." Mark raised a glass of sparkling cider. "To Mia, the rising star of the family." Ethan stood in the corner, a forced smile plastered on his face. His eyes lingered on Mia as the room erupted into applause. Inside, a storm brewed, envy, resentment, and an annoying sense of inadequacy. As the cheers faded, Ethan retreated to his room, slamming the door behind him. The sounds of celebration echoed faintly through the walls, fueling the fire of jealousy within. The seeds of tragedy were planted that night, hidden in the shadows of Mia's success. Mia Delgado's laughter had a way of cutting through the noise, lighting up any room she entered. Her creative dance challenges and candid moments catapulted her into TikTok stardom. One viral clip after another transformed her from an ordinary teenager to a local celebrity. Even with school assignments piling up, Mia navigated her dual life effortlessly, or so it seemed. Beneath the confident exterior, hints of weariness flickered. Late nights editing videos and endless notifications buzzing on her phone began to chip away at her carefree demeanor. Still, the adoration of her fans fueled her drive to keep up appearances. Ethan Walker sat on the edge of his bed, fingers hovering over the strings of his guitar. The melody in his head refused to cooperate with his hands. His YouTube channel, a sparse collection of earnest attempts at music, barely garnered views. As Mia's following grew, Ethan's own creative pursuits faded into obscurity. Every time he posted a new song, silence greeted him. The likes and comments that flooded Mia's posts never found their way to his channel. "Maybe I'm just not good enough," he muttered under his breath, the bitterness clawing at his resolve. His gaze drifted to his phone, where Mia's latest video played on loop, a polished montage of her beaming smile and perfect moves. The gulf between them felt insurmountable. Lisa Delgado and Mark Walker stood side by side at their modest backyard reception, glasses raised in celebration. The newlyweds radiated hope, eager to blend their two families into one harmonious unit. Mia clinked her glass against Ethan's with a polite smile. "Congrats, I guess we're officially step-sibs now." "Yes, guess so," Ethan replied, forcing a chuckle. Mark's voice boomed above the chatter. Now, if only Ethan could learn a thing or two from Mia about building an audience. She's got the golden touch, doesn't she? Ethan's jaw clenched, his grip tightening around the glass. Lisa shot Mark a warning glance, but the damage was done. Later that evening, as the guests dispersed, Ethan sat alone by the fence, staring at the stars. The promise of a united family already felt like a fragile illusion. In the beginning, Mia and Ethan found common ground through their shared love of creating content. They filmed quirky skits and impromptu dance videos together, earning laughs and likes. "You've got talent, Ethan," Mia had said after one successful post. "We should do more of these." But as Mia's fame skyrocketed, their partnership faltered. Brand deals and fan engagements consumed her time. "Hey, want to film something tonight?" Ethan asked one afternoon. "Sorry, I'm swamped with DMS and brand stuff. Maybe later?" Mia offered a distracted smile, already tapping away at her phone. Later never came. Ethan watched from the sidelines as Mia's audience grew exponentially. Resentment festered, their bond unraveling into silent competition. Mark's expectations loomed large over Ethan like a storm cloud. "Look, son," Mark said over dinner one evening, "you've got potential. But potential means nothing if you don't put in the work. Just look at Mia. She's crushing it." Ethan stabbed at his food, biting back a retort. "Not everyone wants to be a social media star, Dad. I'm just saying, maybe you should learn a thing or two from her hustle." Lisa shot Mark a disapproving glance. "Mark, give him some space." But the words lingered. Ethan absorbed them like poison, each comment deepening his sense of failure. Determined to prove himself, Ethan poured his heart into a music video. Late nights and countless takes finally yielded a heartfelt performance. He uploaded it with trembling fingers, hoping against hope that someone would notice. Days passed with little traction. Then, Mia's live stream changed everything. Scrolling through fan suggestions, Mia laughed. "Oh wow, my stepbrother made a music video? Let's check this out." The screen filled with Ethan's earnest face, singing passionately. Mia's laughter was light-hearted, but piercing. "He's got, spirit, I guess." The comment section exploded with mocking emojis and sarcastic remarks. Ethan stared at his screen, heat rising to his face. His phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications, each one a dagger to his pride. Later that night, he confronted Mia. "Why the hell did you do that?" Mia blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "You humiliated me in front of your followers." "It was just a joke, Ethan." "I didn't mean..." "Yeah, well, it wasn't funny." He stormed off, fists clenched. The fracture between them deepened, setting the stage for a conflict neither of them could foresee. Ethan's eyes were glued to his phone, the screen glowing with Mia's latest TikTok video. Her follower count ticked upward relentlessly, each new number a dagger to his pride. The laughter and applause from her fans echoed in his mind, suffocating his thoughts. His own channel, neglected and stagnant, sat like a tombstone in the digital graveyard. He refreshed Mia's page again. Another 1,000 views, another wave of comments praising her creativity. His thumb hovered over his own profile, where a handful of likes mocked his efforts. "How does she do it?" he muttered, bitterness coating his voice. "Why not me?" Every new milestone she hit felt like a personal failure. The weight of comparison pressed down on him, heavy and relentless. The obsession took root, feeding on envy and self-loathing. Ethan stood in the corner of Mia's room, watching her meticulously set up her camera. Her bright smile never wavered, even as she struggled with tangled wires. "Need help?" he offered, masking his true intentions. "Nah, I got it," she said cheerfully. "Thanks though." But he lingered, eyes flicking to the equipment. When her back was turned, he subtly loosened the tripod screw, ensuring the next session would be riddled with frustration. Later, as Mia groaned over a corrupted file, Ethan feigned sympathy. "Tough luck," he said, hiding the satisfaction curling in his chest. Mia's frustration grew with each mishap. "I don't get it," she confided to their mother. "Everything keeps going wrong." Lisa's comforting words did little to ease Mia's mounting doubts. Ethan's resentment festered, tangled with an unsettling craving for validation. Despite the bitterness gnawing at him, he found himself seeking Mia's approval. He studied her movements, her expressions, desperate to decipher the secret to her charm. "Maybe if I'm closer to her, it'll make sense," he rationalized. The line between envy and obsession blurred. He hated her success but craved her attention. The contradiction gnawed at his sanity. "Hey, need a hand with your next post?" he asked one afternoon, masking his motives. Mia's eyes lit up. "That'd be awesome. Thanks, Ethan." The warmth in her voice soothed his fractured ego. For a moment, he felt seen, but the darkness lingered, whispering that it wasn't enough. Ethan's strategy shifted. If he couldn't surpass Mia, he would control her. He became her shadow, always ready to assist, always offering advice. "Try angling the light this way," he suggested, subtly sabotaging the setup. Mia frowned. "Are you sure? It looks kind of weird." "Trust me," he insisted, his tone steady. Gradually, Mia began doubting her instincts. Her confidence wavered as small failures chipped away at her resolve. Maybe I'm losing my touch, she admitted one evening. Ethan's heart raced with a twisted sense of triumph. Everyone hits a rough patch, he said, masking his satisfaction. His manipulations deepened, feeding on Mia's insecurities. He criticized her creative choices under the guise of helpful feedback. That's a bit overdone, don't you think? He remarked casually. Mia's smile faltered. You really think so? Just being honest. He shrugged. The breaking point came with a major sponsorship deal. Mia's face lit up as she shared the news over dinner. They want me to be the face of their new campaign, she beamed. Lisa clapped her hands together. That's incredible, sweetie. Mark grinned. Proud of you, kiddo. Ethan's fork clattered against his plate. The room blurred as jealousy boiled over. Later, as the family lingered over dessert, tension simmered. Ethan's voice cut through the chatter. It must be nice, he said bitterly. Getting everything handed to you. Mia's brow furrowed. What's that supposed to mean? You wouldn't understand, he snapped. You've never had to struggle for anything. Mia's eyes narrowed. Are you serious right now? You think this was easy? Ethan's voice shook with years of pent-up resentment. You're shallow and fake, Mia. It's all just a show. The room fell into stunned silence. Mia's jaw clenched. Maybe you'd succeed if you weren't so bitter and selfish. Lisa gasped. Mark's face darkened, but the damage was done. Ethan pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm done, he muttered, storming out. Mia remained seated, her chest heaving with anger and hurt. The fracture between them had become a chasm, deep and irreparable. Mia twirled under the faint glow of her phone, the music pulsing faintly through her earbuds. Her movements were fluid, precise and captivating. She practiced tirelessly. The backyard illuminated just enough to cast long, flickering shadows. She didn't notice Ethan watching from the corner of the yard, hidden among the shadows, his hands buried in his hoodie pockets. His eyes tracked her every move, but his admiration was long gone. Instead, an uncontrollable anger churned within him. The soft music seemed mocking, her carefree demeanor a personal insult. Enough, he hissed under his breath before stepping forward, his voice rising. Do you ever stop? Mia froze, startled by his sudden presence. Pulling out her earbuds, she spun to face him, irritation flaring in her expression. What are you doing out here? I should be asking you that. Ethan shot back, his tone sharp. Practicing for your army of strangers again? God forbid they forget about you for 5 seconds. Mia sighed, crossing her arms. I don't have time for your jealousy, Ethan. Go back inside. Jealousy? His voice cracked, an edge of hysteria creeping in. You think this is about jealousy? You're obsessed with shallow validation, and you don't even see it. None of this matters, Mia. None of it. Are you serious right now? Mia retorted, stepping closer, her eyes blazing. Just because you can't handle someone else's success doesn't mean you get to tear me down. Maybe if you spent more time working on yourself and less on hating me, you'd be somewhere too. Her words hit him like a slap. His jaw tightened, the air between them thick with tension. You don't deserve any of this, Ethan spat, his voice trembling. Not the followers, not the deals, you're nothing but a fraud. Mia's laughter was hollow, cold. And you're just a bitter nobody who'll never amount to anything because you can't see past your own insecurities. The words were a match to dry tinder. Without thinking, Ethan surged forward, his hands shoving against her shoulders in a flash of unbridled rage. Mia staggered backward, the force of the shove sending her off balance. Her foot caught on a jagged stone protruding from the earth, and time seemed to slow. Ethan watched, his breath hitching as Mia's arms flailed in an attempt to steady herself. Then it happened. Her head struck the edge of a stone garden feature with a sickening, hollow thud. The sound was final, reverberating through the silent backyard. Mia's body crumpled to the ground in a heap, unmoving. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. No music, no shouting, just the faint rustling of leaves in the night breeze. Ethan's feet were rooted to the spot, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Then the realization hit him like a freight train. "Mia!" he gasped, rushing forward and dropping to his knees beside her. Her eyes were closed, her head resting at an unnatural angle. Blood seeped into the soil, a dark, spreading stain beneath her. "No, no, no." Ethan's voice cracked as he shook her shoulders gently. "Come on, Mia, wake up, please, wake up." The scent of iron filled his nostrils, the sight of her lifeless face searing into his memory. Ethan's breaths grew rapid, shallow. His chest tightened as panic clawed at him. What had he done? His mind raced, flipping between denial and guilt. "It was an accident," he muttered to himself, his voice trembling. "It was an accident." But no one would believe that. Not after all the arguments, the tension. Everyone would see him as a monster. Fumbling in his pocket, Ethan pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over the emergency call button. He stared at the screen, his vision blurred by tears. He wanted to call. He needed to call. But the thought of flashing lights, the sound of sirens, the cold snap of handcuffs, his family's shame, it all paralyzed him. "They'll never understand," he whispered, lowering the phone. Ethan wiped his face with trembling hands and forced himself to think. His eyes scanned the scene, his mind clawing for a way out. Moving on instinct, he wiped his fingerprints from the garden stone and arranged Mia's body near her phone and tripod. He adjusted her hand, placing the phone as though she had been filming, and slipped. The sight of her still body made his stomach churn, but he couldn't stop now. This was his only chance to protect himself. As he stepped back, the weight of what he'd done settled like a stone in his chest. There was no turning back. Darkness had claimed him, and there would be no escaping it now. The morning light cut through the trees, casting sharp shadows across the garden where Mia's body had lain. Yellow tape cordoned off the scene, officers moving methodically as a pair of detectives knelt near the blood-streaked stone feature. Detective Harper squinted at the blood patterns, her gloved hand tracing the irregular splatter. "This doesn't look right," she murmured to her partner. "Not for a simple slip and fall." Detective Monroe nodded grimly, gesturing to the surrounding area. No skid marks, no signs of panic movement, and that stone's too far back. If she hit it, she must have been pushed. Harper's gaze darkened. "We're not looking at an accident, are we?" Monroe's response was clipped. "Not a chance." The detectives canvassed the neighborhood. A retired teacher next door was the first to speak. "I heard yelling," she said, clutching her coffee mug with shaking hands. It was heated, angry, then silence. The officers exchanged knowing glances. Back at the precinct, Harper examined Mia's phone. The recording was still intact. As she pressed play, voices erupted from the tiny speaker. Mia's defiant tone cutting through Ethan's enraged accusations. The audio concluded with a chilling thud that sealed her fate. Harper's lips pressed into a thin line. We've got him. The forensic team left no stone unturned. Literally. Under UV light, faint streaks of hastily wiped blood glowed across the garden feature. That's deliberate cleaning, Harper observed. Monroe nodded, reviewing their report. Fingerprints on the edges match Ethan's, and the blood pattern shows she didn't fall naturally. She was shoved. The evidence was irrefutable. Ethan's careful staging had unraveled under forensic scrutiny. Lisa sat on the edge of the couch, her body rigid, knuckles white as she clutched Mia's childhood photo. Her daughter's bright smile contrasted cruelly with the aching hollowness in Lisa's chest. I raised him, she whispered, her voice cracking. How could he do this? How could I not see it? Her sister placed a hand on her trembling shoulder. You couldn't have known. Lisa's tears flowed freely. But I should have protected her. Mark stood by the window, staring blankly at the street beyond, his fists clenched at his sides. I pushed him, he muttered to no one in particular, always telling him to be better, stronger. I drove him to this. Lisa's voice, mummy, raw with grief, pierced the room. You didn't shove her, Mark. He made that choice. Mark's shoulders sagged, but I laid the foundation for it. The courtroom was stifling, tension hanging thick in the air. Lisa's voice cracked as she recounted Mia's vibrant spirit and the unbearable void her death had left behind. Forensics proved what he did, the prosecutor declared, pacing in front of the jury. He wiped blood, moved her body, and tried to cover his tracks. This was no accident. Ethan sat stiffly at the defense table, his jaw clenched, eyes glistening. The jury watched him closely, weighing every flicker of emotion. The prison cell was small but orderly, a reflection of the routine that now dictated Ethan's days. Time had a strange way of distorting behind concrete walls, stretching and folding over itself. Yet certain memories refused to blur. The thud of Mia's fall, the cold silence that followed. It replayed in his mind like a punishment more brutal than the judge's verdict. He had tried to forget the look on Lisa's face during the trial. The devastation etched into every line of her features. Mark's stoic front had cracked only once. But that single moment of raw agony haunted Ethan relentlessly. The journey that led here felt both distant and dangerously close. Social media, success, fame. Things he once envied now seemed trivial. His longing to be seen, to matter, had twisted into something monstrous. And in the end, he'd lost everything. Ethan knew now how dangerous it had been to measure his worth against Mia's carefully curated digital life. The endless cycle of comparison had poisoned his mind, turning admiration into resentment. Social media had become a mirror, reflecting only his insecurities. He had wanted recognition, love, a place in the world that felt solid beneath his feet. But that desire, warped by bitterness and unmet expectations, had driven him to ruin. It was never just about Mia. Ethan saw that now. The unresolved tensions at home, the silent judgments, and the weight of Mark's unspoken disappointment had festered over the years. Suppressed pain had a way of breaking loose violently, leaving destruction in its wake. Ethan's obsession with external validation had blinded him to the emptiness inside. The need for open communication and emotional healing within families is underscored. Had they talked sooner, confronted their wounds instead of burying them, maybe things would have been different. Mia's TikTok remained active, a haunting archive of dance routines, infectious laughter, and unfulfilled dreams. Comments still poured in, a mix of condolences and wistful admiration. Her digital legacy was both beautiful and tragic, frozen in time. From his prison cell, Ethan wrote letters of apology, pouring his guilt onto the pages. Some were addressed to Lisa, others to Mark, but the most painful ones were meant for Mia. I don't expect forgiveness, he wrote in one, but I need you to know I never meant for this. I was weak, and I'm sorry. He didn't know if anyone would ever read them, but the act of writing was a fragile step toward redemption, a search for peace in a world he had shattered.